Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Welcome to Classical Etc. And this is our Christmas podcast. I am Paul, and we're here with Martin and Tanya, and we have somewhat of a plan, but I'm stepping out of the moderator role this time and just letting this be festive. How's that sound?
Are you kind of you thought you'd be a downer if you
possibly, yes. The
moderator.
What I am coming to realize when it comes to the Christmas season is that festivities are festive oftentimes because it gets us out of our structure and our routine.
Well, it does, and it's one of those things when you have a Christmas in particular, because it's such a big cultural holiday, that your routine changes, and I don't like it when I get out of a routine. I think most people are that way, and then you're looking forward to Christmas, and you have fun at Christmas, but then you're really looking forward to the return of the routine afterwards.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, it's the routine that allows you to have the break out of the routine.
Yeah.
It's not a break for me, but it will be next year.
Well, you've got your husband's a minister.
And retiring from, this is our last Advent. And so I'm trying to enjoy it, but I am a little harried.
The last Advent because your husband,
because he's retiring.
Not your last Advent in your life. I'm thinking she's going to announce that she's got some dread disease.
It's the last one where I am obligated to do so much. So this next one, I'm going to pick and choose and not do everything and just do the things that I want to do.
Wow.
Not that I don't enjoy it all. It's just a lot. Like every individual thing I have enjoyed and will continue to enjoy.
You just
when they're all piled right together and there's no time at home, no time to breathe, then, and plus all the other stuff, like getting gifts for people and planning trips to see mothers. And
well, I've heard stories about people who, they're planning on this time, like it could be a vacation or something like that, where they're going to have time to do the things they want, and they get there and it's like, well, so what do I do?
Oh,
you don't think you're going to experience that?
I do not. I think we're both going to really, after 40 years, enjoy actually sitting in church together and just doing not very much at first. I'm sure we will eventually work our way back in because we're both so energetic, but we're going to take a much needed break. And our church has been great. I mean, they give him a 3-month sabbatical every 5 years, which is wonderful. Not a lot of ministers get that. So I'm very thankful for that. But also, I'm as ready for his retirement as he is.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be bored in my retirement. I have all of these.
You've got a lot of hobbies.
I've got a lot of hobbies.
You have so many words.
What does that even mean?
I think you will just write a lot because you have so much you want to say.
Well,
I'm not saying that they're good words, but...
But Martin, you also
I knew there was going to be a knife in there somewhere.
You came in with a stack of books, right? The rest of us came in with a group of papers and a gift book, and you came in with a stack of books.
What? I missed this.
Oh, just wait, Tanya.
I just happened to grab these.
Oh, these are Christmas books.
These are Christmas books.
At first, I thought
a bunch at home.
I thought he was doing the same thing he did last year.
Oh, giving you a used book.
Yes.
So for our...
I would never give anyone a used book.
For our gift exchange this year, it's not exactly a surprise because after last year, I refused for Martin to give me a gift. Therefore, that forced Paul to give me a gift.
Which then forced that Martin had to give me a gift because if Tanya and I exchanged gifts, Martin could only give one to himself.
I then have to give one to Martin. So good luck with your used book this year.
Okay.
That actually may belong to one of Martin's family members.
It's very possible. Well, let's leave that. How should we leave that for the end?
Yeah, I think we should do the gift exchange last.
Do the
it
whole
last?
exchange.
No,
I was going to say your book at the end. But.
Oh, no, these are discussion items.
What? But you don't have the book that or the short story that we're talking.
Well, it was online. I didn't want to print it. I read it.
Oh, okay.
I read it last night, not this morning before the show.
Did you like it?
I liked it. But my comment to Paul, like I
Did you start before I got here?
Well, yes, we did. Was I did like it. It's nice. There was a couple things about it. We should probably, before we start critiquing it, we should probably talk about what it's about
and say which story it is.
Yes, okay.
I'm just thrilled that Paul found it because you and I are the Trollope fans.
Yes,
and we didn't know that he had written a short story about Christmas.
Let's talk about Trollope first. Who is Anthony Trollope? Because we got a Christmas story. What's it called?
Christmas at Thompson Hall.
At Thompson Hall.
So first of all, I found this because you all gave me grief last week for not having read Trollope.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, what would be better than to go find a Christmas story, read Trollope, and come back and say, well, of course I've read Trollope. But in looking for what we're going to talk about today, I thought it was a good suggestion for all of us to read it. Neither of you have read it. And so this is what we decided to talk about today.
Right. So who was Anthony Trollope?
Well, he was an author,
right,
in the 1800s,
mid 1800s.
Was he? I'm not prepared for this question. Okay. Was he? Did he know the other authors in the 1800s, late 18, or he was probably past Dickens, past Austen?
I don't think he was past Dickens. I'm thinking he's mid.
Because this was published in 1894.
Okay. Well, then there would be some overlap then.
A little bit of overlap, but it seems to me like he must have been older, or younger. Mm-hmm. But I do know that he worked for the post office, and if I'm remembering correctly, it's been several years since I've read Trollope, but that he wrote. I mean, his books are big; they're like Dickens books, and he wrote, I think, 1,500 words. He would get up very early in the morning and write 1,500 words before he went to his real job, and managed to write all of these series of books that are just quaint. And he reminds me of MacDonald. Have you read MacDonald's fiction? Have you read MacDonald's fiction?
I have that on my things to do.
As in George MacDonald?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
he wrote fiction about vicars, the life of vicars.
Oh, I haven't read that stuff.
Yes,
yeah.
So
country vicars.
Yes, right, and this Trollope reminds me of that. And there's a lot of upper class, middle class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the setting of all his books, and this is a little bit different because they're
traveling from France to England.
It's a little bit different from some of his book. Well, all of his books. All of his books are set in the English countryside.
Yes.
Before the Corn Laws were passed and some of these other things happened that really changed the whole economy of Britain.
I'm sorry, I can't let that pass. What's a Corn Law?
Well, I don't know so much about the Corn Laws. I just know that they were one of the laws that they passed that the British, because of, they were running an empire at the time, they needed more food production. And the way that this was being done out in the countryside was not the most efficient way to do this. And so when we come to Dickens, we see all these people in the streets of London. These are people, he's coming in from the countryside. And it's because the whole economy has changed, and the smaller landowners are being pushed out
and pushed into the cities.
And so there's this mass migration to the cities. And it was very unfortunate, but at the same time, you can kind of understand the British, we need more food, and that's happened here too. You're a farmer, you can see what's happened with, these agribusinesses and all that. We produce a lot of food, but it changed the culture out in the countryside. So this life that Trollope is writing about in his novels. I've read the Barchester Tower, several of the Barchester Tower novels. There's also the Palliser novels. Right. They just put out a new edition of that. These are about that life out in the English countryside. And I
just that small community. Everybody knows each other.
Everybody knows each other. And he's writing about this sort of mid-level aristocracy, I think.
And just relationships between people.
Yeah.
On that note, I would say that what kept going through my mind as I read this is like a Hallmark movie.
This story?
Yes, this story. I had to go back and look at the printing copyright date because I was like, wow, he was ahead of his time
Mhm.
This feels very much like a Hallmark movie.
It's very funny.
It's very funny. It's one that I would like if I were watching this movie, I would be making snide commentary the whole time about, well, of course it's so and so, sort of thing.
Well, so what's happening in this story? Let's give the setting here. What's the initial thing?
A little
happening
summary.
Yeah. So Mr. and Mrs. Brown are traveling from southern France back to England for the Mrs. Brown's family's, the Thompsons, Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Which it makes very clear in the beginning he never has wanted to do, and she's forced it this time.
Right. He wants to go back. Right?
He likes southern France. That's
Yeah,
where
he doesn't want to go back at all.
Mhm.
right, and you're never really sure if he's faking a sore throat or if he actually has a sore throat as a way of convincing his wife to stop the travels back to England and just stay in France.
Well, he literally says, "If we go, I will die."
Yes, right. He doesn't want to go to this thing, and so
But he has a sore throat.
Yeah. So when I'm teaching literature, that this is sort of the precipitating incident. It's his claim that he is not well and that he's going to die if they continue on this journey. They need to go home. All right. So
Now and these people, I think it's important that they've been married 8 years.
yes.
So they've been married long enough that they know each other well, but still, they haven't been, I think they're still, and maybe it's just their relationship because it is a different time, but like not necessarily on the same page all the time and not able just to say, well, that's just who he is and how he is for both of them.
She's not unwilling to believe him in this, but she still wants to go to her family, right?
That's right.
So they stop somewhere.
They stop in Paris for the night.
Okay, right. At a hotel.
Yes.
All right. And what happens from there?
He says he's going to die if they go on. And she says, well, you'd be much better off in a home than in a hotel where it's not even very warm.
So let's kill you on the way there so that at least you're comfortable there.
And they're on about a half a day out.
They're going to Stratford.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
by train.
Because they get there the night of the 23rd.
Well, they go on an omnibus.
Yeah.
What is that?
Omnibus?
Is it
an
a double-decker bus. You rode on one.
In 1894?
To
oh, I know.
London?
Right. Yeah. Well,
or Stratford?
No, but yeah.
And so...
then that's right, because then they get on the boat.
Yes.
Okay, so they go to Dover.
That's right. But they got into the hotel the 23rd at night. The intent was to get up early the morning of the 24th and be able to get to
Stratford.
To Thompson Hall for the Christmas Eve festivities.
All right. So he's at least ostensibly ailing.
Yes, but she's noticed that he is eating very well.
Yes.
And drinking very well. And so she tends not to believe him. But he does say he will go on, but he thinks that what he needs is a mustard poultice.
Yes.
And he saw a big jar of mustard in
the dining area.
And would she go down and get it? And this is like midnight.
Yeah.
So she heads down.
Is it, the whole time, I mean, I'm just having to convince myself that the mustard poultice is a standard thing.
I've read about poultices before. I'm not sure they had, it is in a lot of this kind of literature. It was a thing, but I didn't know they had mustard in them. I do see mustard smells very strong.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe it would be like a menthol.
Vicks vapor rub.
But what strikes me is that you could only leave it on for 20 minutes and then it would do something to your skin. That I wouldn't have. I feel like I could leave mustard on my skin for.
I'm going to ask for that next time I'm sick.
A mustard poultice.
So he's so she goes out at midnight
to get it for him because she wants him to leave with her, and so she gets lost. And then she finally finds a porter who leads her to the kitchen. But for some reason, she feels like she can't say to him, "Can I have a little mustard for a poultice?" Which makes no sense at all.
She's got a handkerchief she's going to put
there's a description of her about her being this like British matronly.
Yes.
And the illustrations in this don't portray her that way. She looks younger and thinner than she's described in the book.
Yeah, with her husband, she could on occasion be soft, but she was of opinion that with other men, a British matron should be stern. And then she gets compared to being Juno, right? The descent from her Juno bearing would have been so great if she had to tell the porter actually what she was doing. She just felt like she needed this air of superiority.
Okay, so she goes down there. The porter won't go away. Why won't the porter go away? If you in retro, well, we'll handle that
in retrospect.
In retrospect,
he suspects her of something, but I don't know what. Because when they get back up in the hall, he won't go.
But as events proceed here, the Trollope mentions several times that she doesn't have any money to give him a tip.
Yes,
right.
He's waiting.
Oh, he's waiting for the tip.
Yeah.
Okay, that never comes, and that has consequences in the story.
Yes, but so when they get down there, though, she lies because she doesn't want to admit she just needs a spoonful of mustard. Mm-hmm. And so she lies and tells him she's lost her handkerchief. So he goes through every single dirty napkin in the place to find her handkerchief. She knows he's not going to find it. And so after they do all that, she says, "Oh, well," and she heads back up.
No, he forces to walk. He insists on walking her back to her hallway.
Right. And then he wants to go to the door and she won't let him because her husband's in there and she's failed him. So she's not going back into her room. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
So then as all this happens, then she when the porter leaves, she goes back down to the dining area, right?
Yes.
And gets the mustard, puts it in a handkerchief and takes it up to the room. So she goes, the lady goes.
Mrs. Brown.
Mrs. Brown is her name. Mrs. Brown is taken back by the porter to her room, and he kind of hangs around. She finally gets rid of him. She goes back down to the dining area with a handkerchief to get the mustard poultice.
Yes.
And then she goes up to her room.
Well,
and
she
what happens from
very
there?
Carefully made sure she knows how to get back to her room because she got lost first time. And she goes in and she realizes her husband's already asleep. And so she doesn't want to disturb him without.
But she's irritated because he doesn't sound sick when he snores.
That's true.
Yes.
So there's our first foreshadowing here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And so she doesn't, when she, like with the light she has, she blocks his face so that she doesn't wake him up.
Which is just a candle.
Just a candle, right. And then she lifts his beard and puts the poultice on his neck. And
basically smearing mustard on his chest and neck.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all the way down to the collarbone, I think is what they said.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, if somebody does this to me, I think I'm waking up. But he does not wake up.
Yes.
Maybe he'd had a lot to drink too.
Yeah, well, and you know, if you're sick.
So she applies
sick.
this.
Well, this guy wasn't sick, but
she applies the poultice to his neck.
Yes.
And then what happens?
She realizes it's not her husband.
It's not her husband.
After she's got it applied.
Right.
So
she's
then
gone into the wrong
rather
room.
than just wake him up and explain it or go back to her husband and say, "This is what happened. Will you go explain it for me?" She's in a panic because if she leaves it all night, it's going to really mess with his skin. But she does it anyway. And I love the line. I love that line. Well, first of all, I love the part where she recognizes and says she had put the mustard plaster on the wrong man. Not Priam, wakened in the dead of night. Not Dido, when she first learned that Aeneas had fled. Not Othello, when he learned that Desdemona had been chaste. Not Medea, when she became conscious of her slaughtered children, could have been more struck with horror than was this British matron as she stood for a moment gazing with awe on that stranger's bed. So then we've got pages of her trying to figure out what to do.
It is
right?
Pages. It really is.
But I really resonated with this, though she completely recognized her duty and knew what justice and goodness demanded of her. She could not do it.
I underline that
Haven't
line
we
as
all
well.
been there though?
Because she's in a dilemma, right? Because
Yes.
if she leaves it on all, it's going to really mess with his skin. It's going to really kind of mess him up.
But she is in a strange man's bedroom in the
alternative
1800s.
Is to try to clean it off of him, I'm assuming,
and wake him up.
And then she's found out.
Right.
Yes.
And then, but also, right, she can't like go inform the porter that she was in a strange man's bedroom. Right.
That's
like,
right. That's
all
right.
of her options are
very
poor.
unacceptable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and then who's she blame it on? The French? She says, remarking to herself with a Briton's natural criticism on things French, that those horrid foreigners do not know how to make their figures. So she went to room 353 instead of 333.
Yeah.
And it's all the fault of the French who can't write.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Those 5s and 3s just.
Yeah. So
way
she
too close
she
together.
just goes back to her room.
Yes. And then her husband's wide awake.
And her husband's wide awake.
And she doesn't have his mustard.
She doesn't have his mustard poultice
And
because she supplied it to another man.
No, she tells him that the mustard wasn't in the dining hall.
Mm-hmm.
She fibs. She does not own up to it. And
she's at this point just working herself deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what happens after this? She goes back to the room. She has trouble sleeping that night.
Yes. Well, she insists that they have to leave at 5 because she can't take the chance of seeing the porter or this strange man again.
Right.
And so at that point, she's doesn't really sleep, but her husband makes her come to the bed because he has no idea what's going on, except that she didn't get him the poultice. And she's insistent that they leave at 5. So she gets him up, makes him a hot chocolate for his throat, and insists that they leave. And they go down to the lobby, and the porter stops them because he's holding
the handkerchief
that had the mustard that she had left in Mr. Jones's room.
And as a good British woman, she had embroidered her name on every piece of clothing she had.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So the handkerchief has her name on it. Mr. Jones woke up with his neck a hot mess. And a soiled handkerchief in his room with her name on it.
And the porter, who
didn't get a tip.
He's portrayed from her perspective as malevolent,
right?
And he mentions again the whole issue with the tip. She didn't tip him. All of this is really the result of her not giving him the tip. So he basically tells on her, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And at one point, I think it even says that the man who got the poultice would have let it drop if it hadn't have been for the porter. Like the porter really pushed this.
Yeah, he pushed it. Yeah.
And so it becomes clear that this man who had intended to leave at the same time as Mr. and Mrs. Brown is not able to leave because he is very much under the weather because this mustard was on his throat all night long.
Yeah. And at this point, because you were talking earlier about what this reminded you of, this reminded me of a P.G. Wodehouse story. This reminded me of something that would be a plot in Jeeves in Worcester, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Only I think Wodehouse would have, he had these ways of making it even more amusing. And I think he would have probably done that.
Well, because Bertie was so dumb.
Because Bertie was so dumb. Yeah. And this is written many, many years before Wodehouse, several generations. So you didn't have that style of writing that could really ramp this up. But he does a pretty good job of it.
But it's also, I mean, it is very humorous for none of the people actually just being, none of the people are dumb.
No.
Right? Every single one of them is trying to do their best.
That's right.
In the circumstances that they find themselves
in. And yet Mr. Jones, upon whom this poultice has been visited, he is not happy. Right?
No, he's not. But Mr. and Mrs. Brown go back to their room and she confesses all. And Mr. Brown believes her. He believes that she wasn't having a thing with Mr. Jones. And so he goes and explains to Mr. Jones. But you're right. He's not very forgiving at all, even though Mr. Brown has done his best to explain.
Well, and you could probably understand after whatever the effects of his mustard poultice must have been that he's not happy.
And in that conversation with Mr. Brown, Mr. Jones makes clear that he is going to England to get married, or to at least to see or to get engaged, something along those lines.
Yes.
So he's going in the same general destination as they are.
Yes, but they end up on the same bus, on the same boat, in the same train.
In the same carriage then.
That's right.
And then they finally end up where?
In the same house.
In the same house. They're going to the same place because what were the circumstances there at the house with the is it her younger sister?
Yes.
Her younger sister
is engaged to Mr. Jones.
Is engaged to, as it turns out, Mr. Jones,
That's
and
right.
they have not known this all along.
But the funny thing about that whole trip is that she kept her veil down the whole time, like he wouldn't know who she was, and she didn't speak to him.
And he didn't speak to them at all.
That's right.
And what's going through his head the whole time is she did this deliberately. And as they get closer and closer and it becomes clear they're all headed to Thompson Hall, he's like, was she trying to keep me from getting married to her? You know, like he is like falling down the conspiracy theory rabbit holes of why in the world did this woman do it? He thinks he still thinks it had to have been
planned,
premeditated in some way.
Well, and is that not our natural tendency to think that something was planned? I mean, why would she have come to that room? And then I think at some point finally explains to him that she was in 333 and his was 353, badly written by French people. And that's why, he seems to finally come around.
Well, he does, because she is very apologetic, and she is going to be his sister-in-law. So he really had to come around.
Well,
yes,
and even before he's come around, he's like Mrs. Brown keeps saying things along the lines of, well, her sister says, "I do so hope you'll love each other." And Mrs. Brown says, "It shan't be my fault if we don't."
Well, at that point, her sister still doesn't know.
I think she does at this point.
Okay,
because she's told her sister. She's told her sister everything before the rest of the family hears it. I feel like that would have happened by now, but it doesn't matter either way. But the thing about it is, this is Christmas at Thompson Hall, but it's really not a Christmas story. We were talking about how difficult it is to find a really good Christmas story when we decided to do this episode. And we were all saying, we don't know any really good Christmas stories. And this one is framed at Christmas, but it's really just it's just a comedic episode that happens to be leading to a Christmas celebration, which has very little to do with the story. So, there's a Christmas Carol and really very little else. I doubt there's anything really great in what you've got.
In my stack, I did bring our edition
version
of the Christmas Carol, and it really is the greatest Christmas story. I don't think there's any question.
Well, I mean, Dickens wrote several more, and they're not very good.
No, they're not very good.
Well, can I just say the fact that this is kind of framed at Christmas time, but not really a Christmas story, is why I made the comment about the Hallmark movies. Like, right, there's relational interplay in those Hallmark movies, but they're all set at Christmas. Because there's this spirit of jolly good cheer, and and family,
it's all these sort of accoutrements of Christmas that culturally have gravitated around the holiday, and even A Christmas Carol is to a certain extent that way, although I think there are subtle intimations of the true meaning of Christmas.
I think A Christmas Carol's full of Christmassy things all the way through.
I haven't read it in a year or two, so
I feel like it's. Well, you read it last year because
the main message of it is not explicitly theological.
Correct.
Oh, theological.
Yeah.
Not explicitly, but definitely.
But that's what I'm saying. There are implicit things in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a wonderful story. He clearly believed in it in a way he did not believe in his other stories because of the extent to which he went to try to get it published, because he was going to bear the burden of it. He was so confident in it. And I think the publisher was not that excited about it. Yeah.
I didn't know that about it.
So
that's funny, because now it's the Christmas story. I mean, it would have made an absolute fortune for him.
And one of the things about the Christmas Carol is you hear all the time that this was the book that the man who invented Christmas. There's that. I
haven't watched that movie.
Yeah, a movie about this, and how Christmas as we know it was not what it is now post A Christmas Carol. And I'm wondering to what extent that really is true, because it was clearly a very important holiday. It's important here. This is written, before I think Dickens writes Christmas Carol. And I was reading.
No, 1893.
Well, when was Christmas Carol written?
Oh, it had to be earlier than that. I don't know.
I mean, I would say, but
Google.
even it wouldn't have been long. I mean, I don't know
No,
that
it wouldn't have been long.
A Christmas Carol wouldn't have had
An
the
immediate
time
effect
to
to
have
really
the
right,
effect.
because was it immediately popular once he did get it published?
Well, I think it was, but I think the influence of it, I think, took probably.
But
a
you
while.
even look. I mean, the sort of celebrations that they're having in A Christmas Carol, like that wouldn't have rang true if some of those things didn't already happen, right?
Right. But then you have I picked up, and I am really enjoying reading this Christmas, called Old Christmas from the Sketchbook of Washington Irving.
Is that one story?
It's one work, yeah.
Oh, okay.
With chapters.
And it's good?
Oh, yes. And it's got great
not a lot
old
of text on
woodcut
every page.
illustrations.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, and it's not, again, it's not I haven't actually finished it yet. I just started reading this the other day.
This
but I'm
is
about more than
so
halfway
typical.
through it.
Getting recommendations.
No, but I'm more than halfway through it, and
Okay.
this is he's just ruminating
I'm going to read it.
on events at Christmas time, and he's going to this old squire's house, and I can't remember what the occasion is. I mean the reason for him being there, but it's this old. He talks about this squire, and he's proud of the fact that they are celebrate Christmas in the old way. And
Which
this is written pre-Dickens, pre Christmas Carol anyway. And clearly Christmas is a thing. So when we say that Dickens invented Christmas, it's clearly not, doesn't mean that Christmas wasn't an important holiday.
Right.
And I'm wondering, what it is about Dickens, what did change with A Christmas Carol really? Was it because it's a feast, it's a festival.
Right.
And so culturally this is a very important thing even in Washington Irving's time. He's writing earlier than this. So I just that thought occurred to me.
And there's always a Christmas feast in Dickens' giant books, when it's Christmas time. There's always a celebration of Christmas with gifts.
Yeah. So I'd like to find out, how is Christmas different post-Dickens?
I think Jane Austen in some of her books has Christmas celebrations.
Right.
So it was happening, but so what did change?
I don't know. But this
So
old
you brought
squire,
this
he's
up and
wanting
you don't
there's certain old games they used to play in the old days, old days in the mid 19th centuries, which is really old days to us.
Right.
And so there's a lot of that in here about what they did prior to that, because he's wanting them to do that now. And it's they're on this old estate, and it snows in the ground, and Washington Irving's descriptions are just these beautiful things. He's a very good writer, and so that's what I've been reading, because I try to read one Christmas work every year that I haven't read before to see if there's some other good material out there. But there doesn't seem to be all that much stuff.
I mean, I would say if anybody has good Christmas stories, it would be nice if they would send them to us, because we every year say that we would like to do a collection of short stories for Christmas for our giveaway, and we haven't been able to find good stories.
Yeah, and you're going to have to find them. I just brought several things. The Fireside Book of Christmas Stories. I bought that one. And then this one, which had the story, this was Christmas Stories Every Child Should Know. There was that Every Child Should Know set of blue. And there was a story in here. It was our favorite Christmas story, and it was called Christmas Under the Snow.
Who wrote it?
It was written by, I'm trying to find it here, Christmas Under the Snow by Olive Thorne Miller.
I don't know.
And it's not online. I've looked for it online.
Oh, you can't find it?
No. And again, it's not theological, but it takes place out in the prairie in the Old West, and the father goes into town to get something, and this blizzard hits. And so their house is literally buried under the snow with this chimney coming right out the top. And so it's just a story of what they did underneath the snow for several days.
Oh, wow.
Before their father comes back. And it's just a beautiful little, simple, charming story, which is, I think,
that's
the most
fun.
appropriate thing for Christmas. Right.
Yeah. So there are some out there. We just we struggled to find them. We bought several collections that
Yes.
just didn't have.
Right. Well, yeah.
How hard is it? It's like people feel like they need to write a Christmas story. They're great authors, but they really don't have a Christmas story in them.
Yeah. And maybe our listeners could send in
That's
suggestions.
that would be great. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. So now we have books here.
Okay, we do.
And I'm one of those guys, I want to like open the Christmas presents, Christmas Eve. I'm raring to go at Christmas
That
time.
wouldn't be very good radio, but okay.
So we have
We're not going to be. I'm not.
this
That's
is mine?
yours. I don't know. I hope you haven't read it.
You think I might have?
I can't remember. I know we've talked about it, but
This is a Tanya knot.
Is this a moment where you need my knife?
Yeah, I was going to ask Paul's
I
knife.
tried to
look at
make it
that.
really. Let's not do the knife thing again.
Okay.
Have you read that?
The Splendid and the Vile by Eric Larson. I have not.
Oh, good.
So
It's the 1 year, of Churchill's prime ministry during World War II. So it's got Dunkirk in it, but it's literally just 1 year of the war.
Yeah, the subtitle is A Saga of Churchill Family and Defiance During the Blitz.
It's just so. It's just such
never
a
even heard
great.
of
It is a great book and a great. It's got everything about Churchill in that one volume.
Mm-hmm.
It just in this 1 year of him trying to get through the war.
Wow.
That author wrote, what was that? The Devil in the White City. Andy Sojourner just read that one. Said he liked it, but then he wrote another one called Thunderstruck, which I tried listening to, and the narrator wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
But the text itself was very good.
He's a very good author.
So-
A harrowing chronicle, Churchill's lessons of resilience and his style of steady-handed leadership are essential to the state of mind of American readers of Vanity Fair. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to read that.
I hope so.
All right. Paul, I think,
Okay.
wait.
Is this mine?
Tanya, open yours.
Okay.
And mine's from Paul.
That is from me, yes.
It's pretty. It doesn't look like a book.
It is a book. It is a book.
One of those.
Oh, the Red House Mystery.
Yes. Have you read that before?
Yes, I have read it before.
So
Yes.
I was looking for a mystery.
I didn't know for years that Milne had written a mystery.
Wait.
This is
This is yes.
the author of Winnie
Yes.
the Pooh.
The author of Winnie the Pooh
Yes.
wrote a mystery called A Red
Yes.
House Mystery.
It
Yes.
is very. I remember it being just charming, just old world kind of charming.
I was looking for
Thank you. This
a
is
mystery
pretty.
for Tanya that was written, by maybe a more classic author than what she
Than
normally
what I read.
chooses.
Normally,
Mhm.
And-
Her British mystery.
Mhm.
Yes.
But here's another
Yes.
British
that's
person
right.
Yes.
who wrote a mystery.
It
Yes.
is, but it is.
But it's A.A. Milne.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Hmm.
and
Well-
I'm reading Winnie the Pooh right now because we're
That was the
working
other
on
thing
our
I
study
thought. I thought you
guide.
could just go on a Milne binge.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Paul.
Well, my wife wrapped it, so
I love how the bow
my
was
wife wrapped
on
it
it.
because last night she reminded
Oh, it
me.
is. It's a used
It's a-
book.
She reminded me
But it's
last night that
hardback.
I had to get a book for Paul, and I thought,
Do you ever? I mean,
The Flaming Forest.
okay. Now this one is a okay. Let me explain.
another
This is by-
used book. Now there's nobody left
No,
for
this is
you to.
actually no. And my response, she said, "Now, do you have a book in your library you could give him?" And I'm thinking. And
So we
I
have to
went
blame
down.
Joyce for this.
I thought of the author, and I went down, and I've been shelving my boys' books. This used to be, this was these not boys' books now. These are old adventure books everyone read. But and I looked at, I thought James Oliver Curwood. I bet I go, and sure enough, I had a copy of this. I'd already read it, and I thought this is perfect for Paul. It's a.
I love the way you just don't spend any money on us at all.
Well, no, you think about it this way, Tanya. He has been spending money on us for decades.
Oh, right.
But he just held on to it for that long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is The Flaming Forest by James Oliver Curwood. James Oliver Curwood was one of the most prolific American writers ever.
He's Canadian,
when he
isn't he?
passed away,
no,
Michigan.
This is,
He-
it is a novel
Oh,
of
a
the
novel of the
Canadian
Canadian.
yeah,
Northwest.
okay,
but-
so So the James Oliver Curwood, when he passed away, I think he was the he was the highest paid writer living at that time. That's how popular he was. Now his house was in a town right south of the Canadian border, and he would actually leave out of Michigan every year for like 6 months, and he'd go up and he would just by himself. He built 15 cabins by himself, and then he wrote. And
he'd build a cabin and then he'd go inside it and write a book.
And go inside and write. And so there used to be a genre of fiction called Mountie fiction. About the Canadian Mounties.
I'm so glad you didn't give me this.
they were Canadian westerns.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
And they were different from American westerns because of the Canadian English influence. Mm-hmm. Okay, so American westerns are very individualistic. There's the two men on the street, alone, fighting each other in a gunfight, and it's that sort of thing. Whereas Canadian westerns are about the Canadian Mounties, and the Canadian Mounties are basically a British creation. They were a lot of former British soldiers from the Boer War had come to Canada, and they went out, and these were tough guys, but the objective in a Mountie novel is not a gunfight on the street. It's going in and establishing order without firing a shot. That's the English way of doing these.
Yes, it is.
So this is going to be fairly boring. Is what? No, it's an adventure story.
No, he's a Mountie, but this is a great story. It's a great story.
No,
you like Curwood.
I do look forward to it. This actually is very reminiscent of the Sabatini novels that I enjoy. I mean, even just the printing of it.
Yes,
like it is, and it being an adventure story, I think I will enjoy it.
And these are not in print anywhere, so you have to find the old used copies of these things. And Curwood's one of the authors I would like to help make famous again.
Well, and here's your start.
Well, and Tanya, I will have you know, I could have ordered a used copy of this.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And yet I tried to find a pretty one.
You did find a pretty one.
But I couldn't find any. I looked everywhere looking for online pictures of the inside because I was worried
the inside's nice.
Yeah, I was worried the inside wouldn't be nice.
No, it's nice. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to next year again, so maybe I can give Tanya a gift and
we might.
This is in pretty good shape.
Well, when we get a host, it's their turn.
Well, I was going to say we might just have to make Martin give a gift to himself, but
yes.
Well, thank you.
So we didn't talk about what we're reading. I just want to say, can I just say?
Yes.
I finished Demon Copperhead.
All right.
I did. I finished it, and I don't know that I would have if I hadn't done the whole experiment with David Copperfield first, because it's so painful, because it's and I've thought what does this say about me? It's so much easier to read about an orphan child's difficulties in the 1800s than modern now days. To read about Appalachia and the awful drug problem and the terrible disservice that we do young people. And, it's just a huge problem. And it's very real. And she has done a very good job of telling that story. And it's painful to read. Mm-hmm. So
why do we like to read painful things?
Well, I would have quit.
Oh, would you?
If I didn't know that it was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I knew that because I know how David Copperfield ends, and her parallels were really just beautiful.
If you had known how painful it would have been, would you have read it? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, well.
Because there's something, we like to torture ourselves in some ways.
I don't know. I would have stopped. I really didn't know what it was about. I just was fascinated by the fact that she had taken David Copperfield and used that book as her model to parallel a modern day novel. And I was curious about that. Mm-hmm. But once I got into it and it got so painful, I think I would have stopped. Mm. But I knew, because David Copperfield, because he comes through and he becomes wiser and he ends up happy. I knew that this main character who was surrounded by so much pain in his life was going to be okay. So I didn't stop. Mm-hmm. But if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't read Copperfield, I wouldn't have finished this book.
Yeah. Okay.
And I like Barbara Kingsolver as an author, but it's just hard. And it's a very painful book to read. Mm-hmm. It does end up fine.
Yeah.
But it's a lot, it's 550 pages and a lot of it is pain.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Aristotle says we read or watch tragic plays for pity and fear? Those are the emotions that we...
Because why would we want to have
There's some kind of
fear?
catharsis that goes on when we read something where bad things do happen.
Right. And where in a sort of living that sort of pity and fear is in some ways a training ground for us knowing when we ought to feel pity, when we ought to feel fear. Mm-hmm. And it's a part of his defense of the tragedies, I think, is
like it's teaching us.
It's been a long time since I read it. I should go back and reread that.
Well, and I think we say that about anything that we read. That one of the reasons we're giving students good literature to read is so that they can experience things without actually having to experience them. And it would make you a more empathetic and a more compassionate person. And it certainly made me think about the big corporations that have been throwing drugs out and have made them so accessible. The clinics where a teenager can just go and get a prescription of drugs. It does. I mean, there is something to be said for that social injustice literature that does make you more aware, and hopefully, you would maybe even be able to do something about it.
Yeah. So it's sort of a training ground for our emotions, right? I mean, and it's just, again, the Greeks had figured all this out because the greatest tragedy ever is the Oedipus story. And that's one where you're feeling all and it's a terrible story.
Terrible.
And it doesn't end all that well.
Right.
But there's something cathartic about that.
Yeah. And to think about, right, for Tanya reading Demon Copperhead, right, she's there by herself just reading this going, why in the world am I doing this? Whereas for the Greeks, they would go watch together this play of Oedipus. And, the idea, right, when you're going to something, you're like, hey, we're going to, this is a social thing. We're going to, right. And I think that's what caused Aristotle to kind of think about this. Like, why are we all excited to go watch this horribly tragic story? Is because there is something that it trains us in. Is there,
I mean, you're reading, this story obviously does this, but it seems to me like tragedy has really given way to comedy in the contemporary world. I mean, and we like to amuse ourselves by sort of light, funny things as opposed to these really serious, tragic things. We're not like the Greeks anymore. Why are we like this now? And I don't know why that is, but it seems to be the case.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I feel like it is. It is probably more rare to have like a King Lear where like everybody's dying, or a Hamlet, because that's tragedy in the full sense of the word, right? Because and I think it's in the Poetics, right? What we have of that, where Aristotle talks about that, where what the distinction between a comedy and a tragedy is not whether there's lighthearted things that happen throughout, but what the end result is. And I do think that we have, generally speaking, we don't like stories to end poorly. Like if your book had ended poorly,
I would have been mad.
You would have been mad, but maybe that's what you need to feel.
But it had enough tragedy in it that you were just glad to see this one character be able to get beyond that and to get the help that he needed. But his friends, his girlfriend, I mean, people were dropping like flies over.
Oh, this sounds lovely.
Everybody, and he was an orphan. And so he needed these relationships and they were all just destroyed by drugs. So you really need, in a book like that, you need somebody to be, you've got to, because there's the hope is that all these countless characters who didn't make it. Somebody did. There is hope that you can make it beyond drug
it just doesn't
use.
just leave us in a depressed state.
That's right.
So I already mentioned Old Christmas by Washington Irving. That's what I'm reading over the Christmas time. What are you reading, Paul?
Well, I picked up The Prague Cemetery by Umberto Eco.
Prague Cemetery.
The Prague Cemetery.
That sounds like another uplifting story.
Right. I read a couple of chapters in it right before I went to bed, and I've completely forgotten what they were about in like the intervening 2 days. So I was trying to decide whether I was going to go that route or whether I was going to pick up War and Peace and just try to crank through it over Christmas.
I just hate to read War and Peace during Christmas. I'm going to wait until after and hope that I can get through it before we have our next group.
Yeah. Okay. So that's I haven't fully,
because Michelle told me the next part's about war.
So I'll get through that quick. I'll enjoy that.
I know.
All right. Well, Paul, wrap it up.
Well, this has been our Christmas episode.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Hopefully you get a new book for Christmas.
That's right. Everybody
May
deserves
all your
a new
friends
book.
be better than Martin. Thank you for watching this episode of Classical Etc. Please consider liking or sharing this video or commenting below to let us know what you thought. This has been Classical Etc. with Memoria Press. We'll see you next time.